Okay, we're gonna begin shortly. Okay, good morning, everybody. June 17th. Happy Father's Day, but one day belatedly. I'll call the meeting to order. I'll acknowledge the land that we're on is Mi'kma'ki, the traditional, the unsurrendered land of the Mi'kmaq people. The peace and friendship treaties that date back to 1720 are very important to us, to this council, and I believe to the whole community. Does somebody want to consider the approval of the minutes of May 2-7? Moved by Councillor Cuttle, seconded by Councillor Russell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Order of business. Anybody? Madam Clerk, any changes?
There have been no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Thank you, Katie. Does somebody want to move adoption of the order of business? Councillor Russell, seconded by Councillor Mason. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Business arising. Declaration of conflict of interest. Motions of reconsideration, rescission, deferred business, tabled matters. We have none of those. Correspondence.
Correspondence has been received from the clerk's office for item 1311 and has been circulated to all members of the committee.
Thank you. Petitions. Presentations. Public participation. I think we have some people that wish to speak, so at this point, if anybody wishes to speak, they can signify and come forward.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, we have one person registered online via Zoom.
Okay. Do we have people here? We'll hear the people here first, or does it matter, Katie? Come ahead. Welcome to Council. Thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Matt Stickland, and I'm a resident of District 2, and I would like to talk to you today about your strategic plans, specifically why they are not working. For this, I would like to recontextualize what the division of powers is at all three levels of government and what your power actually looks like in practice, but I only have 5 minutes. I got to blast through a lot of stuff, so I'm going to oversimplify things like way too much. So the federal government, as you all know, is in charge of things outside of Canada. The provincial government is in charge of things like services to the provincial population, and your power is specifically about land use, how our city actually physically looks. And our strategic plans, specifically when it comes to the realm of transportation, are not really affecting our built environment in the way that the strategic plans lay out that they should. And I think this has a lot to do with the fact that our strategic plans, specifically the modern ones from 2018 to 2023, the new Strategic Road Safety Framework excluded, are very good strategic plans. But the rubber is not hitting the road when it comes to actually implementing these plans. And what I mean by this is take, for example, the motion I think that Mr. Russell is bringing forward tomorrow, maybe Wednesday. I got my meetings a little jumbled, about the overpass, the pedestrian overpass in the 101. This is as a direct result of a municipal decision to put a transportation hub about 1 kilometer away from a mobile home park. The reality is, there's a safe way to drive there. It is long, it is inconvenient, it is expensive, and therefore people are taking the closest way to the place they need to go, which in this case happens to be walking across a highway. And so, like, when you're thinking about how your power is actually used, and when you're thinking about how your strategic plans are actually using their power, they need to be thinking about what the built environment does to the patterns of life of your constituents. And take, for example, there's a motion, or I think it's maybe an information item on Wednesday about Otago Drive. This is a perfect example of a strategic, or sorry, not Otago, wrong Cole Harbour Road, Colby Drive, which is there's islands there. The islands are wildly unpopular. There's a staff report about, what we should do about the islands. And the options that staff are giving you are traffic calming of 2 degrees, either islands or speed humps, islands and speed humps, or nothing. But at the same time, Colby Drive is an integral bike connection between the Saltmarsh Trail Network and the Portland Hills Trail Network. The best available evidence suggests that on top of traffic calming and things like that, something that makes cars travel slower, something that makes people move differently, shift our modal shift perhaps, something that saves the environment, is bike lanes. You could put a bike lane on Colby Drive. Now, I'm not saying whether or not we should or shouldn't put a bike lane in, but I am saying if you have an integrated mobility plan, which is supposed to change how we move, if you have a climate action plan, which is supposed to prevent us from damaging the planet, and if you have a strategic road safety framework that is supposed to make us safer, and there is an option that fits all of these criteria, why are staff not presenting it to you? I'm not saying we should or shouldn't do it, but I am saying there are options that are not being presented to you that really should be if our strategic plans are being followed. And I don't really know what the fix is here because I'm not an expert on your back end. I'm an outside observer, so I can't really tell you how to fix it, but I am telling you that you should be far more concerned with the fact that your strategic plans are not working like you want them to. For me, a strategic plan, you can shorten them down to one sentence, which I would call the commander's intent, which is from my background in the military, i.e. you get sent to go do something, but you know what the intention of the plan is, so if you hit obstacles, you can say, oh, okay, this is what we are supposed to be doing here, therefore what can we do within the realm of whatever? So for example, in the IMP, the commander's intent would be to bike and bus more. The commander's intent of Halifax would be to stop damaging the planet. The commander's intent of the Strategic Road Safety Framework would be stop killing people. If there are solutions that fit all of these three buckets, like a bike lane on Colby Drive, if staff are presenting you an option that is presenting you options that lack something that would fit your intent in favor of things that don't, that is a huge problem within your system that needs to be fixed. So unless anyone has any questions, I would highly recommend that you examine your strategic plans and how they work together, because right now, specifically in the realm of transportation, they're not, but tomorrow you're going to talk about how that's not really working in emergency management. We talked about for the past month how it's not really working in housing, and as a result, we got a huge suite of bylaw changes that I think will probably fix it in like 15 years or so, which is kind of the best you guys can do with your jurisdiction. It is what it is. Anyway, so yeah, please look at why your strategic plans are not working, are not playing well with each other, essentially.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stickland. Appreciate you coming forward. If somebody else wants to speak here, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Seo Gaudet, and I live in Dartmouth, District 5. I'd like to share my experience as a member of the Regional Watersheds Advisory Board. I direct your attention to page 7 of the governance review that's been submitted to you today, where it is stated that the last fulsome assessment of the RWAB, completed in 2019, recommended to commence the process to dissolve the committee. Already in 2019, staff's advice was to dissolve the RWAB. They clearly saw no need nor role for it. At that point, the responsible thing to do would have been to take that recommendation to council and obtain a decision. That is not what they did. Instead, they continued to invite people to apply to join this board. They did this in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. I can guarantee that every person who applied for those volunteer positions in any of those years was doing so in good faith and in a spirit of serving their community. Like me, they would not have applied had they known that staff had already determined that they wanted no such advice from any such volunteer board. For 5 years, this administration wasted the time and abused of the goodwill of every volunteer who joined after 2019. They canceled most meetings. They ignored our comments and advice. We had no communication whatsoever with the Environment Committee, who, according to our mandate, we were supposed to be advising. But all of this is about process, and there are very important substantive issues at stake. Watershed health is extremely important. It is not as if HRM could not benefit from independent expert advice on watershed management. One of my former colleagues at Environment and Climate Change Canada, who is one of Canada's top limnologists, when I explained to her our policies related to blue-green algae, said to me, "What decade are they in?" I'm not saying that your environmental staff are incompetent. They are highly competent professionals. However, they work in a highly complex political environment and face all of the normal resource constraints and pressures to conform to the corporate culture that every civil servant faces. That is why having an independent expert committee advising our Environment Committee, which was the intent, could be and could have been so valuable. Paid consultants cannot fill this gap. They are not independent. As for efficiency, I can think of nothing more efficient than the city having access to the free advice of a group of highly trained and experienced water professionals who in some cases could be charging hundreds of dollars per hour for their services. Until 4 days ago, ladies and gentlemen, until 4 days ago, we were never told what staff truly believed about the RWAB. I believe that every person who in good faith joined the RWAB after 2019 deserves an apology from this administration for having recruited them under the false pretense of providing advice to the Environment Committee and placing them in a situation where their advice was not sought, was not welcome, and staff believed that the board that they were named to should not even exist. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gaudette, very much. We have somebody online. We'll go online, and then we'll see if there's anybody else that wishes to speak. So who do we have online, Katie?
We have Mike Lampo online. Lampu.
All right. Hello, Mike, can you hear us? Mr. Lamplugh, are you here?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, if you can hear us.
Okay, oh. All right, there we go. I was muted and no audio or video.
Well, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, basically what I'm going to be suggesting today is a little bit of feedback to folks on the governance report that you're getting. So on June 20th, 23, initiated by Councillor Cleary, staff were directed to review all boards, committees, and commissions that include citizen volunteers. Along those lines, an email call for feedback from these from the volunteers via online survey was initiated on April 3rd of this year with a deadline of April 9th, 6 days to respond. Now, myself, I'm a resident of Whites Lake, and I have served on the Western Common Advisory Committee for a number of years. I'm not actually going to talk about the good that I believe we have done over the years, but I'm looking really at talking about the process whereby you're doing this governance review right now. Since April 22nd, 22, the Nova Scotia Provincial Bill 137 has been impacting many of these groups' activities. In fact, suspending many of them until 2025. I'm not all sure why Council is now looking to make permanent the shutdown of citizen feedback that the provincial government initiated. Democracy is messy, takes time and effort to consult and to get consensus, often not easy. However, it appears to be the best method of government us humans have found thus far. We are fortunate to have this option here in Canada, as many countries do not allow it. We should not abuse the process of consultation we have developed by acting in an authoritarian manner. Last Thursday at 8:44, June 13th, I received an email about the upcoming HRM government's review. The agenda would be distributed the next day, on Friday. At 11:34 on Friday, I received the agenda and the report of the government's review for the first time. And that I only had people that received, and I don't even know if all other committee members have received this or just the chairs. Only had until 16:30 of last Friday to even ask to speak to council, as I am now. I mean, how effective this has been is the fact that I'm the only one talking to you folks online. So really, you're doing this late on a Friday and having a meeting early on Monday. So, boy, you're not giving us much time. I do not know if all the group membership received this notice or just the chairs, as I mentioned. Certainly no time to review or a committee to meet prior to the Friday deadline. Today being Monday at 10, not even 3 days, it's actually less than 3 days after your report was released. You're now having this meeting and you're going to review it. So we don't really have transparency. I am really disappointed in the approach being taken here. It certainly does not give the public reason to trust the committee's motives. Where's the transparency? How does this build trust? It really doesn't, folks. It destroys it. You could do this so much better. You don't need to do it this way. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamplugh. Thanks for joining us. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at the meeting? Is there anybody else? Is there anybody else? If not, I'll thank Mr. Stickland, Mr. Gaudette, I think, and Mr. Lamplugh for joining us today. Information items brought forward, none. So we go to reports, 13.1.1. This is the governance review, phase 1 implementation plan. Mr. Ian McLean, our clerk, welcome. You want to do a presentation, Ian?
Thank you, Mayor Savage, through you to the rest of the committee. My name is Ian McLean. I'm the municipal clerk for the Halifax Regional Municipality, and I'm joined here right now with Laura Lewis, who is the deputy clerk, and we have a number of staff in support of this. Looking forward to provide you a report that is providing the start of a multi-year, multi-process, multi-phase approach to this governance review. I want to be really clear on this. I want to say some huge thank yous to members of administration who supported this, from government relations, as well as the internal staff members that were included on this. I do want to talk a bit about what the process was for distributing this report. We went and took the outside step of circulating this report to all members of the ABCs that were affected and providing a notification prior to this report being public. We put this report and made it public through the report processes that we are guided with and have to follow for all of our agenda reviews and all of our agenda circulations. So when this report went out, we proactively informed all members of ABCs it would be coming and let them know how to sign up for public participation and to correspond with members of Regional Council. So as was said before, we are here today to bring you a report back on the review of the roles of agencies, boards, and committees within the HRM. I want to start off by saying this is a very complicated report. This is a report that typically is handled by a third party, not done internally, just because it is complicated, and it does have that conversation of trying to respect and trying to support our staff and as well as our citizen volunteers. We have a number of residents who serve on our boards and committees, and what we attempted to do through this was really provide a clear and kind reality of what these groups are. As you may have heard or seen, there's some preconceptions of what some of these groups do, which are very different than the reality. We've gone through over the course of the last few months to try to provide that clarity to some of these groups, but also trying to provide that forward to this group today so you could see the reality of these groups. What we are bringing forward to you today is an ask to change the system for some of these groups. We have groups, and you've heard from some members today, who are working in committees, providing very important volunteer time, but with committees that have very small mandates, small scope of influence, and ones that have changed significantly since they were created. A report on the Regional Watershed Advisory Board was brought to Executive Standing Committee in 2019, and direction was given by Regional Council to continue with the Regional Watershed Advisory Board the way it is. Staff have been trying and attempting to continue on with the direction of Regional Council for the Regional Watershed Advisory Board. we are doing everything we can to try to support and bring these groups forward, but with the incredibly small mandate in terms of reference left for them, any items that are brought forward outside of information are all ones that staff have volunteered to bring forward to them in an attempt to make these groups work. What we are saying in this report is we can no longer keep these groups working with the terms of reference we currently have, and we need to see something different moving forward. This includes a bit of a maturation of the governance process and of the staff process, and that's what we've tried to bring you today. I want to be really clear as we talk to this. Everything we've done in this report has tried to respect the incredible volunteers we have in this community, but as well also the very capable and highly trained staff that are trying to work within the organization and bring forward good policy. So, as was mentioned before, and as was mentioned by the last speaker, public involvement plays an important role in municipal government in Canada. Unlike other levels of government, municipalities operate at the heart of communities, making citizen involvement essential for the responsiveness and inclusion of the governance of the municipality. This has been pointed out as a source of pride by members of regional council, but is very complex in practice. Many of the formal decisions of regional council require a formal public process to be followed and have prescribed legislative steps that need to be followed prior to decision. Council has also prescribed specific public feedback processes through a variety of different decision-making processes and steps. Our agencies, boards, and committees, which I will refer to as ABCs for most of this, within the city are very diverse in subject matter, reporting, and overall influence. All of our ABCs are either empowered by legislative requirement or directed in some capacity by regional council. ABCs are supported by staff liaisons for the subject matter and the content, and the clerk's office supports the recruitment, administration, and the communication between the staff liaisons and the actual committees. The clerk's office does not create content for these committees. Some ABCs date back prior to 1996, and some have been formed recently. We have a significant amount of ABCs within the Halifax Regional Municipality that are directly managed and supported by administration. We have many that are happy, some that are confused, and some that are lonely because they don't have any items to come forward to them. What we're trying to bring forward to you today is a chance to give these groups and these volunteers good, meaningful work, and for some of them to look at, is there actual work that can be done with the current structure? The theme that we have tried to provide in this report is holistic. As you've heard from some members, these are really important content categories for people. These are things that people are passionate about. These are advocacy groups for many of these groups, or many of these contents. For some time, public feedback in the decision-making process was responded to by municipalities through forming a committee. This is not unique to the HRM. Many other municipalities that we've talked to are going through the same process. Most of these municipalities are having these conversations in camera. We are doing this publicly. We're trying to do this in an open and clear way. Currently, the HRM has 21 internal ABCs. Additionally, there are 14 external ABCs with members of the public and/or councillor appointments managed by the municipality. This does not include the HRM's community councils, 6 standing committees, as well as the other groups that members of regional councils sit on and staff as well. It is important to note through this that ABCs are not static. The municipality has changed significantly since many of these groups were created, as well as the content, as well as the staffing. Most of our ABCs are empowered by terms of reference that specifies what they are directed to do by council and how they can operate. I want to be clear on this. Council has directed these ABCs and how they operate and what their terms of reference look into. This is not administration doing this. This is council's terms of reference with how they've directed these groups. This has created ABCs that once had large scopes and spheres of oversight and influence, and have seen their terms of reference shrunk and have direct roles in projects shrink. Many of these groups are now only empowered to receive status updates or additional information. This has created frustration for members of the ABCs, as well as staff liaisons who are working very hard to make these groups work and to support these groups all they can. The HRM as an organization has also completely shifted since this time. Internal subject matter expertise has grown, and many of these groups were created prior to the HRM having specific business units tasked with providing subject matter expertise and oversight. This poses obvious challenges, some of which you've heard today, from members and staff alike. There are also increasing logistics coordination challenges, as well as duplication of oversight resources and ABC support. There also is a conversation that needs to be had about the shrinking network of volunteers that we have, and specifically the subject matter expert volunteers that we go to for some of these committees. It is getting harder to recruit. As was mentioned, we go out in good faith and recruit based on the terms of reference in an open, honest, and accountable fashion for every one of these boards and committees when we go to our recruitments. We have to recruit based on what the committee's terms of reference are and what the tasks in front of them are. You saw this in the last couple of years with two of our groups, the DRC and the DAC. When their terms of reference shrunk, we brought you individual reports to talk specifically about these committees. What you're seeing in here today is the first ever attempt at a holistic review of all of these boards and committees to try to provide a uniform process. As was mentioned before, Bill 137 did affect the groups, the committees that were meeting. The long list of ABCs operate under a different scope and under different influences, but the impact of the Bill 137 highlighted some of the work that was being done on these committees, but also the effects when the work is not brought to these committees. Through consultation, staff have noted that in some instances related to planning matters, the pause on some of the activities of ABCs have created some operational efficiencies with limited impacts on and outcomes of the decision-making process as the public engagement was baked in through the entire planning process. As you can see, we are here to try to solve and come back to respond to this motion of council. The last review of the HRM governance system was conducted in 2013, between 2009 and 2013, and resulted in the implementation of the standing committee process. This was done, and many of the groups that were affected by the standing committees were not changed to reflect the standing committee process. This is one of our lessons learned from this, and what we're trying to do with this is to bring back a holistic review and response to this motion. To complete this approach, we are recommending multiple phases. What you're seeing in front of you today is the initial phase, one of the more complicated phases, but really should be a phase that, if you look at the report, is trying to bring a realistic approach to what we're trying to tackle here. What we are requesting is that this initial phase looks at how we are currently structuring our committees and addressing some of the committees that are no longer operating with the terms of reference wide enough to keep a committee satisfied. To looking at moving forward is looking at a review of our standing committee, lived experience committees, as well as some of the other processes in order to clean up some of these groups to try to make their meetings happen in a more organic fashion. Phase 3 is a report that we want to bring forward that talks about specific guidelines for creating a new committee and for all committees that must be followed, including looking at an end date for committees and a review date for committees. And then finally, we also want to look at the councillor appointment process. To try to follow up and meet the goals of this motion, it looks as a multiple phase approach because of how broad and expansive this topic is. We are here today looking at phase 1. So in keeping with the motion of council, this phase aims at a review to look at efficiency, accountability, and in reinforcing a policy-focused approach that is required to operate with regional council's direction. It also tries to continue similar logic for the future reviews and look at our evolution of standing committees. As part of this review, an inventory and analysis of all existing ABCs were committed, and we identified committees that were out of scope for the governance review. Justification for out of scope included legislative required committees, committees that are fulfilling a clear mandate or fulfilling their intended roles, or ones that are external to the HRM. Our out of scope for this phase included community council, standing committees, some of our required ABCs, such as the Board of Police Commission or Heritage Advisory Committee, as well as all external committees. While out of scope for phase one, I want to be clear that we may look at some of these groups moving forward, especially when we get into our committee process. The Government Relations Office and the HRM completed targeted internal engagements across the organization with staff who are identified as frequent users of HRM's ABCs. HRM interviews were completed with key stakeholders to look at inefficiencies and potential redundancies. There was also a narrative research volunteer survey that was sent to all active volunteer members and was completed by 51 of the volunteer members. The survey highlighted that people were generally really excited to support and volunteer for the organization, but 48% thought their work would have a greater impact on municipal decisions than it currently did. All of this information is provided to you in this report. Throughout this process, we have done everything we can to try to respect the volunteer work. We've been going to meetings with the Regional Watershed Advisory Group since January to try to discuss this question, to meet some of their concerns with this shrunken mandate. What we're attempting to do is to try to solve problems and issues that are happening on both sides of this conversation. We are bringing forward to you some recommendations today. It is important to note that current state is not recommended for any of the current committees that we are speaking about. What is currently happening is not recommended. Status quo is not appropriate. It is not meeting the expectations of the committee, and we are not seeing work come from these groups because we cannot bring them work for them to provide a scope that would make them feel like they're doing something that they feel proud of, is my open, honest observation over the last little while. There's a need to change many of these ABCs, and there's intention of this exercise. We don't bring this forward to you lightly. We are aware of the comments that were made from members of the groups today. We are trying to provide a realistic approach to this. Currently, these groups are largely, through their terms of reference, able to see and hear information and get updates, not provide advice to staff. This is what we are trying to be clear to Executive Committee and to these boards about the current realistic state of these groups. I'm not going to go through each individual one. It is in the report, but we can ask questions. We have staff to talk specifically about that as well. Nope, sorry, my apologies. The other part of this that we brought forward is trying to satisfy the motion for an HRM Parks Advisory Committee. As a part of the review of the existing ABCs, it is not recommended that advisory committees specific to individual parks be continued. It is recommended that public engagement continue through master park planning processes, and that parks be considered for environmental and for their environmental, ecological, recreation, legal, and social benefits. During phase 2 of the governance implementation plan, where CPED and ESSC are expected to be looked at, we hope to provide some additional clarity here, but we are not looking at recommending an overall parks committee at this time. You saw this briefly, but this is not the end of this conversation. We are looking at a phase 1 approach right now where we can get some clear direction to bring forward additional changes, but we are looking at this being a lengthy conversation. Again, we are providing and attempting to look at the first holistic review of all these boards since amalgamation. There was that formal review of some of these committees that was done. We talked about the 2019 report that went to Regional Council on RWAP. We are looking at a holistic review and trying to provide clear and concise recommendations for the governance of the organization and committees moving forward. That is the end of our presentation. We are available to answer any questions, and we do have members of staff available as well.
Thank you very much, Ian. I appreciate that and the report. And we know that this took a lot of time, and it's a difficult process. Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you like me to put the motion on the floor here? All right. I move that the Executive Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to 1, prepare amendments to the terms of reference for the Active Transportation Advisory Committee and Point Pleasant Park Advisory Committee as outlined in Attachment 2 of the staff report dated May 24th, 2024, and return to Council with the proposed amendments for Council's consideration. And 2, commence the process to dissolve the Community Design Advisory Committee, Halifax Peninsula Planning Advisory Committee, Harbor East Marine Drive Community Council Planning Advisory Committee, Investment Policy Advisory Committee, Murchison Drive Master Plan Committee, Port Wallace Community Public Participation Committee, Northwest Planning Advisory Committee, Regional Watershed Advisory Committee, and Western Common Advisory Committee, and to return to council with the necessary amendments to dissolve these committees. 3, prepare amendments to Administrative Order 48, the Community Council Administrative Order relating to the creation of planning advisory committees as outlined in the staff report dated May 24th, 2024, and return to council with the proposed amendments for council's consideration. And 4, complete the remaining phases of the governance review implementation plan as outlined in attachment 3 of the staff report dated May 24th, 2024.
Thank you. Second for that? Second, Councillor Mancini. Can we, oh, there you go. We got some time back. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you. Yes, that was a long one. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of things that come to mind in doing this work, and I want to thank you for, tackling this kind of, a bit of a beast that has been created over many years of really, I think, council trying to do the right thing and getting engagement from the community, but the effectiveness of which is raising a lot of questions, right? And I get that too. I sit on some of these advisory committees, and there's often a lot of confusion. I do just want to talk about the timing, and that I don't think it's adequate to give something on a Friday, like give a report on a Friday and expect feedback on a Monday. People have lives, our volunteers have lives. That's over a weekend. You don't know what commitments people have. And it really, it's something that we see time again in terms of people being able to provide meaningful feedback, even council sometimes, when we don't get enough time to properly review staff reports or motions coming forward and provide the feedback that can often really kind of enrich the context around a decision or provide additional information. Often and this is just a general comment, I feel in these situations, it's often driven by the AO, which I realize, but also by staff. We seem to be able to accommodate staff in the time that they need to complete a project, pushing deadlines, pushing deliverables. But when it comes to public feedback, we're very rigid. And I think that that's something that we need to look at how we can better accommodate people, particularly our volunteers. And I'm speaking specifically to the comments made by Mike Lampu from Whites Lake and the Western Common Advisory Committee. My concern here are a couple things. One is about, some of these committees are very important, and they provide, they have the potential to provide input on issues that are current and very relevant to our municipality. I think about the regional watershed one and the work that we need to do better around our watersheds and our rivers and our streams and our systems. And that needs both a big picture and a very localized picture in order to understand the impacts. What I don't understand is that if we dissolve this, what are the formal opportunities to replace these committees and ensure that there's opportunity for people to bring this information forward? I note in the staff report you say we have many standing committees like the Environment, and Sustainability Committee or Community Planning and Economic Development Committee, that these are opportunities for the public to come forward. But what I'm concerned about is how we focus in on specific issues and find a mechanism that we can continue to move those issues forward towards new solutions, new understanding, better cooperation between communities and the administration. So I don't specifically understand what's going to replace this, and I feel it's going to leave a gap. As far as the Western Common Advisory Committee, yes, they did have a big role in the initial conception of the Western Common and what that plan was going to look like. I wonder if the problem isn't that the purpose of the committee didn't evolve. So because the purpose of the committee didn't evolve, their role has been diminished, rather than coming and saying, well, is there an expanded role? I worry about the Western Common Advisory Committee, because the Western Common is Halifax's first ever wilderness park, and it's severely underfunded. And I just feel that if we dissolve this committee, there'll be even less focus on trying to get this park to its next phase, because we just won't have the people. And I understand that there are recruitment issues, but the feedback I get from people who are being recruited is that it's confusing, the times of appointments aren't clear, that if you are a chair of a committee, because you don't know who's coming in, or if you're leaving, or if you're going to be reappointed, we haven't done a good job of treating our volunteers as professionals, as many of them are, or taking seriously their role. And I feel it's often an afterthought. And again, I realize this is due to an AO, but I'm wondering, are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater here by dissolving them all, rather than trying to amend them so they can be more effective and have a greater role? And I guess that would be the biggest question I have right now.
So, Mayor Savage, to the councillor, the agendas and the reports are circulated to members of the public and council according to Administrative Order 1. We have done everything we can to try to communicate with our boards and committees in this in an appropriate way. One of the options as well through this that we talked about was going to these committees to develop a work plan, to develop something they could do. But we paused on this because of the direction of council, because what we don't want to have happen is for a group to develop a work plan saying, look at all the things that we can do, and then we go and say to them, that's not under your terms of reference. And I want to be clear, there is no staff allocated to these groups. So any additional work that these groups need to do will have to be done through a supplemental staff report and will include additional staff resource asks. That is the only way these groups are going to be able to function from the staff liaison side of things, is if we start staffing them and providing them with dedicated staff to be able to create this work for them. I'll pass it off to Shannon, who can talk about the water quality stuff, and I'm not sure if there's somebody from Western Commons. But again, this is similar in tone to the 2019 report that was brought forward to council, saying, if you would like that to occur, we would need to see a formal change in direction, and that will include some significant staffing requests.
Shannon Miedema.
Thank you. Shannon Miedema, Director of Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. I'll just speak a little bit about RWAB, as you pointed out. So RWAB, and Aaron McIntyre is here too, who might want to step up, but RWAB was created a really long time ago when, and actually by planning and development, and there was actually a trigger mechanism for policy review, and there was a real gap in understanding of how to consider watersheds in our decisions that we were making. And actually, it wasn't RWAB at first, there were different watershed advisory boards across the municipality or the region. And when I came on board, now 14 years ago, there was really just one person that did water work for HRM. And now Environment and Climate Change is 30 people strong, and we've really become much more sophisticated and changed our approach for how we do community engagement. I think we've just approved a whole new community engagement strategy, and we've been really moving towards multi-stakeholder management, so multi-stakeholder watershed management, which means bringing in many diverse voices that are specific to a watershed. And Council actually asked for this report, and it's coming to Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee in August, proposing this watershed framework that our team's been working on for about a year, with deep consultation and engagement to create it, with 2 pilot watersheds proposed to start getting into the work, which would bring in our partners at the provincial government, bring in academics, bring in residents and others, similar to how we do all of our really big work, like our climate work with our Halifax network that has over 100 organizations represented, and then we have a whole public community engagement process as well.
Thank you. Aaron, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Erin McIntyre, Director of Development Services. I don't know if there's a whole lot more to add on. I'm very outcome-based. That's what I keep my eye on that target. And I think as things have evolved, we've become much more nuanced and sophisticated in how we handle community engagement. So that's one big piece of this. And then relative to the rest, the strategic plans, Halifax Green Network Plan, Council has given us a wealth of direction now, where in the past, as Shannon said, that was missing. So we're finding when we engage with these advisory committees that we're either getting advice from them, feedback from them that aligns with Council's direction, in which case we would have landed and aimed in that direction anyway, or it doesn't, in which case that's the source, I think, in many cases of the frustration, right? Where before we had a gap, now we don't. And so it's putting us in an inability to respond to the feedback that we get from a technical perspective. And community engagement is otherwise available. I think that's the other piece that I'd offer, just that we're not looking to disrupt conversation with community. We're looking to get as many avenues and groups involved in that. I think we're doing much better than we had in years ago. And so I think that's I think the platform on which we're providing this feedback to the committee today.
Thank you. My time's up, but that's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a note, whatever happens here today, this would go to council for further discussion. I didn't ask in consultation with Katie that any councillors that wish to come, who are not normally members of this committee, could come because of the importance of this, and some have joined us and will be welcome to speak. I'll go through the list of people on the committee first for a first time, and then any other speakers who wish to join the conversation are welcome to. Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, I want to thank each and every volunteer to every one of our committees for stepping up. We have a very engaged community, and we have expertise that truly wants to share and assist. But all along, I've always stated that if we're not going to utilize volunteers on these various different committees, if there's not a direct role, we have enough work. We don't need to make work project, and respectfully, we want to make sure that those volunteers' time is respected and their expertise is respected. I want to thank staff. This is tough work, but this is really important work. And I know that you deal with the general public on these topics, and a lot of passion for the work those volunteers do. I want to talk about the Regional Watershed Advisory Committee. It did come to staff, as Ian mentioned, that it came to council that it was recommended before that we disband because there was much more expertise available within the Environment Committee. The council at the time had that conversation. We're worried, are we not taking advantage of it? Of this expertise that exists. So Councillor Clear brought forward the motion to keep it. So staff followed direction and kept it. But along the way, Mr. Mayor, you know, these gaps that once existed, as Aaron just mentioned, have been filled by our own professional staff. We had one person, now we have, how many now, Shannon? On your, how many? 30. And how many fall into that category of expertise around water? Yeah, so way more expertise and the ability to go out and utilize consultants when necessary. And as just mentioned by Shannon, the watershed management framework, which was a direction of council, is coming back in August to more expertise. So, you know, I am fine with that, that decision to disband. If we're not going to utilize them, if there's not a real opportunity to utilize them, disband them out of the respect to those that volunteer. We are now have much more expertise than we've had before, so I do support that. I also suggest for this committee and other committees that we have that we also look at, and I don't know if even you've looked at it, any, you know, guidance around leadership for chairs and vice chairs, because you know, there's some committees that are just the individuals from the street that are looking at helping out, which is great and that's valuable, and there's some committees that have a lot of academic expertise that may have a different perspective on how to do things. And managing that group can be difficult when you have different opinions. So we need to give some leadership assistance. So there's no question here, Mr. Mayor, other than I support the Regional Watershed Advisory Committee. I do want to make one last comment, though, on the Port Wallace Community group that is being recommended to disband. Let's be crystal clear. They were very engaged people from the community around Port Wallace. But once Bill 137 came in place, there was no need for that committee anymore because there was no, we had no legislative authority because the province chose to step in. So thank you for the work, folks. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
You mean support removing it, right?
Support removing.
Okay, just for clarity. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, folks. Thanks to the clerk staff for this report. I support the recommendations as presented. One of the things I want to remind the committee members, councillors here about is that many of these committees, or a lot of these committees, and the structure of these committees predates the standing committee. It says that on page 9 and when you're talking about parks, but we didn't even have a standing committee structure until 2010 or 11. And and now we've put the public consultation or the public participation part up to the start of the standing committees, and I, believe that in the future we may allow even more deputations and consultation to happen at standing committees, which makes sense. But I remember, geez, how many clerks ago, was that 4 clerks ago, I guess? Well, Kathy Mellett told me the reason why, one of the main reasons why they brought in the standing committees was exactly as Councillor Cuttle said, is how much time and notice are we going to have? So bringing things to standing committee means that they're in the wild, in the public, longer before they get to regional council, where the decisions are actually made. Which is why you've seen me repeatedly, especially when we were coming in and coming out of COVID, saying things actually have to go to standing committee. Like when we suspend the rules at council and vote to do things expeditiously, we are actually taking away that consultative time with the public, the chance for the public to sit with the report. So I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of things have changed, and I support the general direction of this. Certainly committees that I've been on, like CDAC or the Peninsula Planning Advisory Committee, the goals or mandate of those are done, or in the case of the Planning Advisory Committee, with the center plan being adopted, the rules that they were there to consult on no longer exist or no longer operative. So getting rid of those makes total sense to me. I'm interested, the Point Pleasant Park Committee's fine, and the people work really hard, and we moved it to only meet every 2 months, but we did that because it also had a real low amount of stuff to actually discuss. And so I do remain concerned. My main concern isn't we're cutting off the public. My main concern has been, I've seen a lot of committees in the last 12 years where we ask people to come and then they have nothing to do, and it's a waste of their time, and it undermines their confidence. And we had a lot of churn on a lot of these committees because of that. Why keep Point Pleasant Park? Can you kind of unpack that I mean, you have an explanation in the report, but it's pretty, bureaucratic, I guess. Like, what do we gain from keeping that?
Mayor Savage, through to the councillor. I would say that Point Pleasant specifically right now is a keep the committee, and then we are looking at phase 3 for a formal committee process of what are the guidelines for a committee, how does that look, and then through these next phases, we're going to continue to look at the existing committee. So I think that the current state, the current need, and talking to staff, the current use of the committee seems to be positive. We're recommending this is a natural evolution of the HRM. This is a growth in the governance of the HRM. What we're actually recommending is we're trying to build in a system so we're permanently reviewing these committees.
Excellent.
And that would mean that Point Pleasant's current iteration, we are saying right now, works, but would become part of the review to make sure that we haven't looked at our governance process for 28 years.
I'm glad that we are going to actually address the issues we've had with that committee, which include, technically on paper, it says that our volunteer citizens are supposed to run civic events in the park, which makes no sense at all. So I support these changes. I think as long as our focus is to make sure that when we have a committee, it has adequate work and that's providing needed input on questions that we have, rather than just an ongoing commentary on operational stuff. I think that bringing more comments into the standing committee and community councils makes more sense than maintaining those committees. So I support these changes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hensley.
Thank you much, Mr. Mayor, and being around here the longest, I've seen the evolution of committees and boards and agencies over the period of time, and there's always been growing pains, and I can appreciate trying to find which is the best way to get public input and process along the way, and this is just one of those things. In regards to the Regional Watershed Advisory Board, I remember how that first came about when we had the Dartmouth Watershed Advisory Board, and then we wanted to bring a larger mandate, not just the Dartmouth Lakes. But the question I would have to ask, and back then, and I still ask today, is what jurisdiction do we have on the lakes? Is it provincial jurisdiction or municipal? Some cases federal when it comes to migratory fish patterns and DFO and stuff. So it gets very convoluted, or the waters get muddied, I guess you could say. Halifax Water has 9 watersheds, and most of those watersheds have an advisory board or management plan or management committees. You know, not strictly to do with the water quality for drinking water purposes, nothing to do with recreational uses and stuff. So the question is, it seems like a bit of an overlap. Certain lakes already have some kind of management plan or someone overseeing or reviewing their processes with Halifax Water. We have our own in-house experts now. And we have other organizations out there like Love Your Lakes and stuff for doing a lot of information, seeking input from residents to monitor their own shorelines and stuff for blue-green algae and other things like that, or coastal erosion, or people cutting back too closely to the shorelines and stuff. So I'm curious, is that where do we go from here? Do we just leave it in the hands of the staff? Or do we get more jurisdiction from the province in regards to, do we have more oversight over lake use? You know, I would not just talk about lake use zoning, but actual lake use activities and stuff. So the question is how much regulation or authority will the municipality have over our waterways? And that's what I'd like to get some clarification on.
Shannon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. That's a great question. And, you know, we work really closely with provincial government, with DFO, with Halifax Water. We even have standing meetings every 2 months, specifically on lake water, with Halifax Water and with the province. So, you know, we're really moving towards this multi-stakeholder management because we actually all have a really important role to play in protecting our lakes, and they're different, they're varied. Like, the province is the regulator of lakes, and so they kind of have that regulatory role, whereas, you know, we have some land use powers, and we, you know, are the community level of government and can encourage best practices. And we run the Lake Watchers program, where we're actually testing our lakes with lots of volunteers across over 70 lakes in HRM. So I'd say that while it can be contentious sometimes over who's responsible for what we're trying to do is just get everyone in the tent and actually commit to terms of reference and have a steering committee. That's what's going to come forward with this proposed watershed framework that we're going to be discussing in the summer. And it's really an evolution of the conversations we've been having with all these partners, and everyone's really kind of on the same page about this. So we're hopeful that that is a really nice path forward.
I think it's also important to, along the way, is to keep the community engaged, and I don't know if it's through our Shape Your City portal or more extended public input opportunities. Sometimes I find that sometimes we cut our public participation a little too short, or give short notice and stuff, and especially in rural areas where you need to have that communication extended a little bit longer for rural participation. Not everybody's hooked to an internet or fast downloads or timely broadband connections, but, you know, some people just still read the newspaper and stuff, and we need to have an opportunity to make sure those people have adequate opportunity to have input. In regards to the planning advisory committees, I've seen them in some places dissolve and some places still be maintained, and it becomes a bit of a political football back in the day when we had a PAC in disagreement with the community council in regards to some of the development plans, and so it became a little bit of frustration, I guess you could say, between the two organizations or two levels of organizations, and I think that through the standing committee process we have now and through the reevaluation of our municipal planning strategy, I think we're going to probably get rid of a lot of those planning advisory areas of conflict. So hopefully that will move forward. But I'm also kind of curious in regards to the new council a few months away from now. How are they going to be oriented in this particular situation? Like, are they going to accept as it is now, or is this council going to set the table, have it in place for the new council, or will the new council have to deal with this and adapt or adopt it?
Mayor Savage, to the councillor. We're recommending a phased approach that will go probably into midterm for the next council. So this is kicking off some of the initial parts of this, but we will not be bringing forward a committee structure system until 2025 at the very earliest, I would guess. So I would say it is going to be a multi-prong attached and looking at the CAO, but I think it'll be an effectively important one through the council orientation to talk about the committee governance process as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ian, and everyone for this report. You know, it is timely to have a governance review, and especially with some of the things that were happening after the Bill 137 in terms of reference changing. And so I think with the planning advisory committees, I really enjoyed my time with that, and especially working with members of the public when they were looking at development agreements and projects. But that function has really been negated now. Are you foretelling that bill might stay past, 2025, and that the committee will not be necessary anymore? Excuse me, I'm sure of that. But following up on the watershed advisory stuff that Councillor Hensby was saying, so I've sat in on meetings at the Collins Park Watershed Advisory Committee, the Middle Musquodoboit Watershed Advisory Committee. Will they also, and I know that they're sort of in partnership with Halifax Water, so will they be affected by this governance review as well, or they stand separate?
Mayor Savage, to the councillor, we have no formal relationship with those groups through our office.
Okay. So that's great, because I see that there is a connection sometimes with planning and development. And so we've been able to look at that from a watershed perspective when development agreements are coming forward. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. So seeing that continue, I think, is a good thing. I am curious about how those committees may be engaged with the watershed strategy that you're thinking about. Like, where would those two advisory committees be connected or engaged in developing the watershed strategy? And to Mr. Gaudette, thank you very much for your service on the committees. For the Regional Watershed Advisory Committee, I am sure that you gave very valuable insight, and it is appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. I had a look at this, and a lot of these committees, I can certainly see, have not been doing the work that we had hoped, and largely because of the provincial bill. And these are the public advisory committees, so I can certainly understand how there would be a desire to dissolve them. What we also have is the structure of those committees is they would talk about individual projects, and we have the ability for them to do that at the community council meeting, and we have public information sessions. So I can certainly see how the impact of those committees would be limited. I also checked with Councillor Cleary about the Investment Policy Advisory Committee through the weekend, and he would agree with the staff recommendation on this, in his own words. The one that I had the most challenge with, and I was on the fence for a while, was the Regional Watershed Advisory Board. We have staff now really appreciates the value of the citizen scientists that we have and the citizen input. We have the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee that receives the input. We have a lot of good ways for the members of public to especially those with expertise that is incredibly hard to develop, and frankly that we would be getting at an expensive rate if we had hired them. I certainly agree with the comments that were made earlier about that. Having them step forward in a volunteer capacity and be able to offer their help has been incredible. I do appreciate the work that the members of the committee have brought forward, but we do have other means to get that. And so I am also going to be supporting the recommendation that is coming forward. Thank you very much for bringing it to us. And as the Deputy Mayor mentioned and Councillor Mancini mentioned, thank you very much as well to all of the citizens who have come forward and helped with the committee and have developed the expertise to make our understanding of the watersheds and all of the other processes better. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this report. I was actually working in the clerk's office back in 2010 when we went through a very similar exercise to evolve many of these committees, and the standing committees were born. And so I think it's a fair point that it is a good time for the clerks and for council to review the purpose, and also just from an administrative perspective, the redundancy, potential for redundancy, and how we can ensure that we're serving communities in the best manner. I am concerned about the Regional Watershed Advisory Board. I attended many of those meetings in the early days, spoke out about the need to have a councillor on that committee. I'm concerned about the Bedford West water quality testing and the review that is tied to the development agreement. And so I'm wondering if staff can talk to, just speak to the fact that through this Bedford West water testing, what is the vision now that it's no longer going or will not be going to the Regional Watershed Advisory Board?
Erin?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, just in conference with Shannon here, because we both of our teams have a bit of a piece of the Bedford West one in particular. So the developer's required to do monitoring and report that, and whenever things are not going glowingly, Shannon, you can step in with the science here anytime now. In any case, it is reported forward to our web. And it's not, it just goes to Northwest Community.
Just our web. Okay, not sure.
In any case, it's a bit of a closed loop. There's nothing for our web to do with it. It's great for us to socialize it with them and for their awareness, but we're bringing that right back in internally to figure out what the long-term planning is relative to the watershed management. I think that's the important piece, right? We have the report. We're using the report in tandem with Shannon's team in order to support policy going forward and figure out what the right solutions are. And so our web itself isn't really mandated to direct staff to do that. So we're doing that irrespective of the terms of reference of our web.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate that. I do think that our web, is a valuable citizen scientist approach. I think I want to thank all of the residents who were engaged on that committee, for all of them. I was also a member on the Planning Advisory Committee for Northwest. I do understand that that's no longer going to be valuable for council based on provincial legislation. But I do think that we need to do a better job communicating to the residents, helping them see the value, but also creating value for them to be engaged in this process. And Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for opening the floor to having me here, since I'm not a member of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments I would have. As Councillor Mason mentioned, we came to council just as the standing committee system was sort of taking effect. It was incredible to me that we didn't have standing committees like before that. And we had some councillors that didn't like them at all. Councillor Mason, as I recall, some resisted it an awful lot. But for a city of our size, the standing committees play a really important role and should play a pretty important role. Just a question, some of these are impacted, of course, by Bill 137, which is scheduled only until April of 25. It could always be extended, I suppose, but does that give you any pause about changing the rules of committees based on something that may change in next year?
Mayor Savage, thanks for the question. I think that's been one of the complicated parts of this review. We tried to look at the internal review process, looking at efficiencies and a linear path towards council. What 137 has done is it has made it very clear on where the value and where the input of the committees is able to go. And I think what we're saying in this is that even with 137 in place or not in place, that the public engagement portion, the actual engagement components are substantially not affected. Is that fair to say? So I think we are confident in doing it at this time.
Thank you. And the only other comment I'd make is as we go forward with this to council and as we talk about this in public, that RWAB is one of the worst acronyms that I've heard. And this is a city of acronyms, HRM. So we just need to make sure people understand. One of my goals in life is to try to get rid of acronyms when we're dealing with public who don't understand the difference between CDAC and CPED and all those things. So just a small point. Anybody else? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that is carried. That will go to council now, and we will have more discussion. And to the point that has been made, I think quite validly by folks that they've only had a chance to look at it since Friday. It will give people a chance to have a look at it more extensively and discuss it. So thank you. Ian, last comments?
What I wanted to make, Mayor Savage, is that this is scheduled to go to council on July 9th. So July 9th would be the date that it is scheduled to go to council.
Okay, thank you. I know it's a lot of work, and I know from just sort of as we've done agenda review and schedule, I know how seriously you take the impact that this will have on people who've volunteered, you and your staff. And so I appreciate that, and I just want people to know the work that you've put into it. So thank you to you and to the team. It's a big piece of work. Erica, you going? Thank you very much. Okay. 1312, municipal and CSAP. That's the Conseil, what is it? It's the French School Board election. Mail out cards and completion date for revisions period. There's no presentation on this. Councillor Russell.
I can put the motion on the floor. I move that the Executive Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council, 1, direct the returning officer to provide additional notification to voters in the municipality by mailing them postcards which notifies them that the preliminary list of electors has been prepared, and such notification may include promoting the 2024 municipal and CSAP election, and 2, based on the advice of the returning officer, set the date that the revising officers must furnish the returning officer with the preliminary list of electors, together with the amendments they have made to the lists to be Friday, August 30, 2024. I so move.
Second, the Deputy Mayor.
I have
Russell.
nothing on this. I was prepared to just approve this as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this, but I do have a couple of questions. It's obvious that we need to do this. I mean, the history tells us how low our municipal election turnout is, which is also concerning because there are rumors out there we might even see a provincial election, which concerns me prior to our election. That'll be most likely even lower turnout. So we need to make sure that this goes out. The one question I do have is, will there be any direction or information to also remind residents that their electoral boundary may have changed in that same notice? Because some people have paid attention to that, some people may not be aware of it, but in my opinion, if we're going to send out this mass notice to everyone, let's remind them there are boundary rule changes. I don't recognize the unbearded guy next to you, Mr. McLean, but anyhow, if you wouldn't mind responding to that piece.
Councillor Mancini, through you to the rest of the I'm trying to think of a joke, and I can't do it right now. It's not fair. So, it is weird to see him without a beard on, I will be frank, to be honest. So
Probably the easiest way to lose 20 pounds, though.
Card him for cigarettes. I card him for cigarettes.
Councillor Mancini, Mayor Savage, to the rest of the committee. We noted on that comment on the boundary on that piece of collateral. I will also note we are also trying and will be going on a complete campaign for district boundaries when we get closer to the election date.
Oh, okay.
So once we hit September, October, that is part of our communication campaign, specifically on the areas of the community where boundaries have shifted substantively. I also want to note that the district boundary naming report should be coming to council on July 9th. This report was delayed because of the decision timeline from the UARB, so that is what we're waiting on as well to start really pushing that promotion as well.
Yep, great job, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hensby.
In regards to the district naming, do you want any input on that from the local councillors that are well aware of their communities, or should we just wait till after the election and then name them? And also this voter help center, when will that information be available for the public? I'm thinking about July, or I should say August newsletters and stuff. This information could be helpful to get out there since the area to register is the end of August. So just kind of curious of what information we can get beforehand.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Mr. Mayor, through you to the Councillor. The Voter Help Center will be stood up on July the 22nd, right at the beginning of the revisions period. So we'll certainly have some material that we can provide to you. Any help that we can get to get the word out, in addition to our normal communications push that we'll be doing starting very shortly, and then continuous until election day. So we'll get that information for you. We're staffing up right now, so we're very much in the recruitment training process. So that will be complete, and we'll have call center agents or contact center agents available starting July the 22nd. With regard to your first question, maybe I could say keep your cell phone on in terms of getting those opinions as well too. So straw poll, certainly with councillors as well. It will be a part of that report. And secondly, there's been a lot of collateral as well and communications push on the boundary review, as it has said. Names will be put in place, and then of course there's a process for changing those after the election as well too. So, but we want to make sure that people are aware not only of the boundary review, but certainly that there's a name identified with those districts, particularly as we get into nominations and more communication for the election.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, did you have something else? Did I see the light come on?
Just a very, very quick reminder to anyone, when we will also be doing an active campaign to ensure people put their name forward for the voters list and make sure that their information is up to date on the voters list throughout August, September, and October as well. That is the part of the boundary review. We also want to make sure people have their name on the list.
Thank you. The question, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. 1313, amendments to emergency management bylaw E100 and add order 2018-006 OP. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the Executive Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council adopt bylaw E103, the purpose of which is to amend bylaw E100 to reflect the transfer of the role of municipal emergency management coordinator to community safety as set out in attachment C of the staff report dated May 21st, 2024, and 2, adopt the amendments to Administrative Order 2018-006 OP, the purpose of which is to reflect the transfer of emergency management coordination from the responsibilities of HRFE as set out in attachment D of the staff report dated May 21st, 2024.
Second.
Second, Councillor Mancini. Councillor Mason, anything on it?
Yes, it's great. Nothing wrong with it at all. I'm wondering if I was reading it yesterday. I sent the email to Ian and Bill that section 11B of the proposed bylaw. I'm wondering if that's the right wording or not. Did you guys have a chance to look at that? Recognizing that it was Sunday. I didn't send it to you, Erica, and I should have. So the way it's reads with the amendment is every employee, agent, and emergency management volunteers of the municipality. And I think how it should read, so this is 11B, he says to John the lawyer, is should read employee, comma, agent, comma, and emergency management volunteer singular. I just think section 11B of the proposed wording of the bylaw. Should have sent it to you too. Here, I'm going to forward it. No, you got it? 11B. It looks like it. 11(1)B. Every employee, agent, and emergency management volunteers. So.
It looks like there's a missing comma after every employee.
And volunteers should be singular to match it, unless we have something called employee agent that I didn't know about. But it looks like that error is from the previous draft from 2018. But
see, the executive director has come forward.
Bill Moore.
Morning, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, through the councillor, in the updated report, at the end, it's been changed.
Oh, so they did make the change between now and
So
today?
there is a comma in the last updated report, at least the one that I have was printed off here.
Okay. What about the volunteers versus volunteer? Is that fixed? It's so rare as a council that we get to actually dig into the legislation in this way.
So what I'm reading on the one that I have here is every employee, comma, agent, comma, and emergency management volunteer of the municipality who has a role.
So that got fixed. Done. Fine. Thank you. Ask for council support.
Thank you. Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So, yeah, this is, it's good to see this coming forward and reflecting the way that we're kind of restructuring the municipality. I guess I just have a couple questions about, what this means in terms of this position. I note that it was, the model was originally part of a provincially accepted model around kind of creating this position of coordinated emergency response piece. I'm just wondering now, are we different than other municipalities? And has the province kind of reviewed and understood this? And in moving this position out of Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency, are there any implications on the powers that this position holds? Or will those powers kind of be transferred to the new Community Safety Office? Just in terms of its, the person holding this role and their relationship to the province and emergency services.
I'll start off with a brief overview from my perspective, and then our Director of Emergency Management will answer the question. I just wanted to say that the province was aware, was briefed, and do believe that where we're headed in terms of vision aligns with where they're going in terms of vision. We started our process to set up the Community Safety Department and started reviewing emergency management a little bit ahead of them. They had come out, I forget how many months ago now, with the announcement about the fact they're establishing an emergency management department. Over to Director Fleck.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor, through to the Mayor. Nova Scotia works completely different than any other province in Canada. So we all take direction from the Federal Emergency Response Plan from Public Safety. The provinces have their Act for Emergency Management, and then of course our bylaw would fall with the direction of the Provincial Act. So we are following that direction from the province, but we do work completely different than other municipalities and provinces across Canada. And as for municipalities within Nova Scotia, we are all the same in that they have an emergency management coordinator because that comes under the Act.
Okay, so it's just a matter of which department they sit in. The position is kind of the same, but whether it sits with, the fire, whether it sits with public safety.
Correct. So it's about probably 60-40, 40% belonging to fire across Canada. 60% have split from fire and have their own divisions.
Okay, that's an interesting fact to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hensby.
In regards to the clause that says the mayor includes the mayor of the municipality or council acting in the stead of the mayor, I'm just kind of curious about situations where it's concentrated to one particular district. The local councillor should be involved or should be a participant in the management committee in regards to being a present, being up to date, being current, being part of that discussion process. I'd like to know how the involvement of the local councillor is going to be through this process, this bylaw. Does it have to be appointed by the mayor, or does he become an ex officio member of the committee? Because I think my experience from 16 years ago this past weekend for the wildfires, and I had more of a background knowledge in the community and neighborhoods than some of the people coming into the neighborhood cold to try to figure out how to best approach certain things. But I'm just kind of curious what the local council, what involvement do you see in this process for them?
Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the councillor, the role of elected officials and how they fit into this process would not be changed through these changes we're proposing here today with the administrative order and the bylaw. Under ICS best practice, when we're in an emergency situation and we declare that we're operating in ICS, one of the general staff positions is a liaison officer. The liaison officer would be working primarily with external agencies, but also would be supporting the incident commander and the agency administrator, who is me, in terms of supporting elected officials and taking questions or concerns from elected officials and making sure that they're addressed. So we have involvement from elected officials through establishing policies, business plans, budgets, through changes to bylaws or administrative orders, the framework that governs emergency management and response. But in terms of when an actual emergency is occurring, we don't have elected officials typically, at the table participating in the response.
I'd beg to differ on that from my experiences.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you to council, so the inclusion of the reference to the mayor in this bylaw is in respect of the mayor's obligations under the Act to declare a state of emergency. It's not a participation within the staffing committees, emergency management, which, as the CEO has said, is a different line of responsibility. So that's the reference to the mayor. It's solely with respect to the obligations under the Act.
Okay. Thank you. Just before we have the vote on this, I want to acknowledge, I think this is the first time that Erica has been at council, at least in my presence, since her retirement from the Canadian Forces after 38 years of strong service to the country. I had the pleasure to be there at Juno Tower, and I know we all really appreciate the work that you've done and continue to do with us, but also what you did for Canada. And as I said to you then, and as I said to your friends, as much as I love spending time with you, I hope I don't see much of you between now and the election, because that usually brings bad news. So thank you, Erica. Ready for the question, colleagues? All those in favor? Opposed? Women's Advisory Committee. Women's Advisory Committee and HRM, Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the Executive Standing Committee request the Chief Administrative Office prepare a staff report outlining amendments to Administrative Order 2019004 GOV respecting the Women's Advisory Committee in the Halifax Regional Municipality to include gender equity considerations, and the committee name be changed to Women and Gender Equity Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not sit on this committee, so I don't. I'm not 100% sure of the origin of this or where it came from, but it is something that I'm generally supportive of, and I'll let any other colleagues have an opportunity to speak.
We've been joined, yeah.
Good morning. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. The origins of this was at the time that this committee had been created, the majority of the terms of reference solely referred to women. That was the language that we had at the time. The committee over the past few months has come to the realization that they're striving more towards gender equity for people of all genders rather than just for women, so had proposed that the terms of reference and the name be changed to reflect that. It is similar to the Women and Gender Equity Wage Canada, as well as Gender-Based Analysis Plus refers to beyond just women and gender equity.
Thank you. Recently at FCM, there was a merger of the Women's Equity Committee along with the Anti-Racism and Diversity and Inclusion Committees. So, I think a lot of, the same goals and outcomes around equity all around are, there's a lot of similarities between it. Some specific differences, but at the end of the day, it's all about becoming more inclusive across the board. So thank you for that information.
Thank you. I'm not sure, did you introduce yourself? There's people all over the world that want to know who this wonderful person who spoke so well is. So.
I did not introduce myself. My apologies. My name is Bailey Brown. I'm the 2S LGBTQ+ Community Outreach and Research Coordinator in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion for the City of Halifax. I am also one of the staff liaisons for the Women's Advisory Committee.
Awesome. We look forward to seeing much more of you. Thank you. Ready for the question, colleague? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Bailey. In camera, do folks want to go in camera? Or do we? Councilor Mancini.
Mike, again, I contest the committee on 15.1. That the Executive Standing Committee, one, adopt the recommendations outlined in the private and confidential report dated June 12, 2024, and two, direct the private and confidential report dated June 12, 2024 be maintained private and confidential. So moved.
Second. Seconded by Councilor Mason. Any discussion?
None to be had.
Ready for the question? All those in favor? Those opposed? That carries. Thank you. What about 15.2? Do we need to go in camera?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, we do need to go in camera.
We will, Councilor Russell moves we go in camera, seconded by Councilor Mason. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and we're back in public, and we're on item 16, added items. We don't see any added items. Notices of motion, there are none. The date of the next meeting is August 26, 2024, and we'll ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved. Councillor Mason, thank you, at 11:43.